Hello and welcome along to another episode of Aviation Analysis, the channel which investigates the greatest feats and tragic events concerning aeroplanes and aero engineering. When one thinks of an aeroplane crash, we tend to visualize a craft dropping out of the sky from a high altitude. Indeed, many horrific accidents have occurred whilst in flight towards their destination. However, there are often times when a plane doesn't even make it into the sky before tragedy strikes. American Airlines Flight 191 was a passenger airline that crashed on May 25, 1979 near Chicago's O'Hare Airport in Illinois, not long after taking off from the runway. Despite its low altitude and a mechanical issue occurring during the takeoff procedure, a total of 273 people lost their lives. This includes all 258 passengers and the 13 crew members aboard the flight, the remaining 2 individuals who died at the site of the crash. In the end, the crash and the number of deaths involved resulted in the event being labelled the deadliest aviation accident in United States history. So what happened that day? What was the mechanical failure that resulted in such a tragic incident? What was the aftermath and conclusive decision from the subsequent investigations that followed? Join us as we conduct our own examination into the horrifying events that occurred 46 years ago. The case of American Airlines Flight 191. As with all fatal incidents, it is worth considering the background and specifications leading up to the disaster, as it is crucial to the final verdict on what happened and who or what was responsible. Though the plane never made it further than the runway, there is a lot to unpack here, so let us begin with the basics. American Airlines Flight 191 was a DC-10 tri-jet wide-body aircraft created by Aerospace Manufacturing Corporation and defense contractor McDonnell Douglas, and was originally intended to succeed the DC-8 for long-range flights. The updated model first took the skies on August 29, 1970, and was eventually introduced on August 5, 1971 by American Airlines, who had acquired it. The DC-10 was powered by 3 General Electric commercial engines, one on each wing and one on the tail. Those on the wings were mounted on pylons, and through forward and aft bearings, the left engine itself weighed 11,612 pounds and its pylon weighed 1,865 pounds. The flight was a regularly scheduled domestic passenger flight from O'Hare International Airport in Chicago to Los Angeles International Airport. On the day of the disaster, May 25, 1979, the DC-10 was due to take off from runway 32 right at O'Hare International Airport when the left engine suddenly detached from the wing, causing the aircraft to crash land approximately 4,600 feet from the end of the allocated runway. Piloting the flight that fateful afternoon was Captain Walker H. Lux, 53, who had been flying the DC-10 since its introduction in 1970. Lux was an experienced pilot, clocking up 22,000 flying hours, 3,000 of which were logged with the DC-10. Likewise, First Officer James Dillard, 49, and Flight Engineer Alfred Udovich, 56, also had a wealth of experience in the air, racking up 9,275 hours and 15,000 hours respectively. Again, both men were familiar with the DC-10 model, as they shared around 1,830 hours of flying time with the aircraft. Now that we know the general information of flight and those in the cockpit, let us now turn our attention to the incident itself, where we try to determine what went wrong. Flight 191 took off at 3:05 p.m. At the time, weather conditions were considered to be clear, with a strong northeasterly wind developing. Nothing that was deemed dangerous or obtrusive to the aeroplane and its planned flight path. All went well with the initial positioning and thrust of speed injected to head down the runway. However, just as the plane was about to take off, something went wrong. During the takeoff rotation, an aerial maneuver whereby an aircraft is rotated to a specific pitch altitude once the jet reaches the predetermined speed and the wing's angle of attack increases altitude and stability, tragedy struck. The number 1 engine and its pylon assembly suddenly detached from the left wing, tearing a 3-foot section of the leading edge with it. This resulted in the combined unit flipping over the top of the wing and landing back on the runway. The aircraft had ascended to approximately 325 feet and immediately began to leak a white vapour of hydraulic fluid and liquid from the damaged wing. First Officer James Dillard followed the flight director, raising the nose of the plane to 14 degrees, therefore reducing the airspeed from 190 miles per hour to 176. This is considered to be the takeoff safety airspeed standard to which an aircraft can safely climb after an engine failure has occurred. It was determined that the engine detachment pulverized in the hydraulic fluid lines that controlled the leading edge slats on the left wing and locked them in place, causing the outboard slats to retract and the left wing to suffer a full aerodynamic stall. The stall meant that the plane turned onto its left-hand side until it was partially inverted at a 112-degree bank angle, its right wing over its left. A photograph was taken just before impact by Michael Laughlin, a fellow pilot who eventually sold the exclusive rights to the picture to the Chicago Tribune for $5,000. Mr. Laughlin of Ontario, Canada, was at O'Hare International Airport on a 3-hour layover on the day of the disaster and was waiting on a flight to Wichita in Kansas. He states, "After I had taken all the pictures, I just stood there stunned, wondering to myself, did this really happen? Did I really take these pictures? Did that plane really crash?" Unfortunately, the plane would crash, slamming into a field just 4,600 feet from the end of runway 32 right, where sections of the DC-10 were propelled across the area and into an adjacent trailer park, destroying 5 trailers and multiple parked cars. Another section ploughed into an old storage hangar at the end of the airport at the former site of Ravenswood Airport. As one can envision, the plane was completely obliterated due to the speed and force of the crash, which included the ignition of nearly 21,000 US gallons of fuel. Nothing would remain except the ruined engines and tail section. Robert Graham, a supervisor of maintenance for American Airlines, witnessed the event as they unfolded and would recall, "As the aircraft got closer, I noticed what appeared to be vapor or smoke of some type coming from the leading edge of the wing and the number 1 engine pylon. I noticed that the number 1 engine was bouncing up and down quite a bit, and just about the time the aircraft got opposite my position and started rotation, the engine came off, went up over the top of the wing, and rolled back down onto the runway. Before going over the wing, the engine went forward and up just as if it had lift and was actually climbing. It didn't strike the top of the wing on its way. Rather, it followed the clear path of the airflow of the wing, up and over the top of it, then down below the tail. The aircraft continued a fairly normal climb until it started to turn to the left, and at that point, I thought he was going to come back to the airport." As per procedure, the contents of the cockpit voice recorder, CVR, were analysed in the wake of the tragedy. It's eerily documented that the last 31 seconds before the final impact were not recorded or known, as the CVR lost connection when the engine disengaged. The only acoustic data collected by the recorder relating to the crash itself is a loud thud, followed by Dillard shouting the word, "Damn," before the power cuts out. This harrowing audio could explain why the air traffic controllers on the ground were unable to radio the crew members to indicate the engine failure. It did, however, assist in the subsequent investigations, where it indicated what circuit in the DC-10's extensive electrical system had failed. From the nearest tower, air traffic controllers could only watch in horror at what was unfolding before their eyes. Audio evidence reports staff exclaiming, look at this, he blew up an engine. Equipment, we need equipment. He blew an engine." It wasn't just the engine that failed the plane that afternoon. As alluded to earlier, several technical systems were also futile in their operation, with the number 1 hydraulic system failing. This continued to operate through motor pumps that mechanically connected it to hydraulic system 3, which was also damaged and began leaking fluid, but maintained pressure and operation until the plane crashed. Another system which suffered malfunction was the number 1 electrical bus, the generator of which was attached to the number 1 engine, resulting in numerous electrical systems to shut down, including the captain's stick shaker and slats disagreement sensors. Though there was not enough time to conduct the action, it is said that the flight engineer, Alfred Udovich, may have been able to reach the backup power switch to restore electrical power to the number 1 electrical bus. To reach the switch, Udovich would have had to rotate his seat, release his safety belt, and stand up. The possibility of this plan working would have only been possible if electrical faults were no longer present in the number 1 electrical system. In the end, no one would survive, with all 271 passengers and crew members perishing that afternoon, alongside 2 people on the grounds below. In the immediate aftermath of the events, speculation and demand for answers was strong, with many journalists, investigators, and most importantly, family members getting a clear understanding and conclusive report on what went wrong. Naturally, the focus of the investigation centered on what exactly caused the engine to detach in the first place. Multiple eyewitnesses, air traffic controllers, and staff members at the O'Hare Airport would state that the plane did not seem to come into contact with an external object during the takeoff procedures. Therefore, a structural failure with the plane itself was examined and determined to be the cause of the accident. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, examined the evidence as well as the CVR details and attempted to piece together remnants of the wreckage and all potential reasons for the crash. They found that the engine's pylon assembly had been damaged during maintenance approximately 2 months earlier. Shockingly, in order to meet time constraints, American Airlines maintenance engineers had removed the engine and pylon from the wing as a single unit. The procedure was in direct opposition to the guidance manuals by McDonnell Douglas, which sanctioned those responsible for engineering to remove each component separately. American Airlines relied on supporting the engine and pylon assembly on a forklift. N110AA's left engine was damaged after being jammed against the wing after a loss of hydraulic pressure to the forklift during a shift change. The small issue would lead to what is known as fatigue cracking, which consistently grew worse each time the plane took off and/or landed. The NTSB investigation was well documented and extremely thorough. Members of the board heavily criticised the manufacturer and Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, stating its failure to detect and prevent the use of improper maintenance procedures. Even more shocking was the fact that the McDonnell Douglas DC-10 had been involved in 2 previous accidents in 1972, American Airlines Flight 96, and in 1974 with Turkish Airlines Flight 981, both of which included cargo door failures. As one would expect, public and commercial confidence in the airline, the DC-10 model and flying in general dropped dramatically after the incident. This led to the FAA suspending the DC-10's type certificate on June 6, 1979. All US-based DC-10s were grounded and banned from taking to the sky. The ban lasted a month before the administration restored its certificate on July 13, 1979. In the end, the horror that befell Flight 191 shocked the aviation and public sector, so much that the industry regulators had to make several changes and take ownership of certain failures laid out in the earlier investigations. The NTSB submitted a number of recommendations, including the need for clarification on quality control processes and reporting requirements. Despite being under pressure themselves, the FAA tried to usher blame to American and Continental, with fines of $500,000 and $100,000 respectively for improper maintenance. Unfortunately for some, the effects of that day left such trauma that 2 years after the incident, it was reported that a 47-year-old mechanic who served as a crew chief at American's maintenance facility committed suicide the day before he was due to give a deposition in a civil lawsuit regarding his role in the crash. The personal toll afflicted him so much that he saw no other way out of his torment. His wife told investigators that he suffered from guilt over the tragedy, even though he was not directly involved in the mechanics that ultimately failed that afternoon. In the years that followed, calls for a memorial were generally left unfulfilled. However, funding was eventually acquired in 2009 by the 6th grade class of Decatur Classical School in Chicago. The memorial was constructed into a 2-foot-high concave wall with interlocking bricks displaying the names of the crash victims and was formally dedicated in a ceremony on October 15, 2011. It was erected in the south shore of Lake Opeka at Lake Park at the northwest corner of Lee and Towey Avenues, 2 miles east of the crash site. A remembrance ceremony was also conducted to mark the 40-year anniversary on May 25, 2019. The site of the crash itself was redeveloped in March 2021 and has been named the future site of an interchange for Interstate 90. And so we come to the end of another episode here on Aviation Analysis. We hope this edition sheds light on the horror that occurred all those years ago and provides one with food for thought regarding the fragility of aerial mechanics and to life itself. It goes without saying that the nature of the crash and colossal death toll has had long-lasting impacts on the aviation industry as a whole. Though we live in a time of constant technological advancement, the margin for error always seems to remain the same. No one could have imagined the events that unfolded that day. Let us hope that the subsequent investigations, changes, and lessons learned from the tragedy, as well as the memory of those who perished, are not in vain. Until next time, take care out there, folks.